They laughed. They pointed. They whispered. "Look at Pops living in that rusty old trailer," they'd sneer, eyes glittering with a mixture of pity and disdain. Little did they know, that trailer sat smack dab in the middle of prime real estate, land I owned outright. The whole damn plot. And the joke, my friends, was entirely on them. This isn't just a story about a trailer, it's about a multimillion-dollar empire built brick by painful brick, a family torn apart by greed, and the quiet satisfaction of watching karma do its thing. It's about the sting of disrespect, the slow burn of anger, and the cold, calculated way I turned the tables. I'm Jack Callahan. Or rather, I was Jack Callahan, the unassuming old man who tinkered with wood in his spare time and lived a simple life in a beat-up Airstream. Now, I'm just Pops. To the world, I was retired, content with my simple existence. But behind that facade lay something much bigger, Callahan Holdings, a real estate behemoth I'd built from the ground up. Decades of blood, sweat, and tears went into that company. And my kids. My son, Greg, and his wife, Tiffany. They lived in the lap of luxury, completely oblivious to the source of their comfortable lives, and completely ashamed of their old man. They lived in a mansion in one of Callahan Holdings' swankiest developments, a testament to their perceived success. They drove fancy cars, wore designer clothes, and hosted lavish parties, all while turning their noses up at the country bumpkin, father/father-in-law who dared to exist in their meticulously curated world. The irony was thicker than the champagne they served at those parties. They were renters, living on my land, under my roof, completely dependent on the empire they so readily dismissed. It was a test, you see. A cruel one, perhaps, but a necessary one. I wanted to see if my children loved me for who I was, not for what I could provide. And they failed. Miserably. The snub started small, almost imperceptible. Not inviting me to important events, claiming I wouldn't understand. Then came the blatant lies, telling their friends I'd passed away to avoid the embarrassment of my presence. But the final straw. The moment that solidified my decision and ignited the fire of retribution. It happened at one of their infamous garden parties. I'd spent weeks crafting a wooden toy for my grandson, a simple gesture of love. I arrived at the gate, eager to see his face light up. Tiffany intercepted me, her face contorted in a mask of disgust. She snatched the toy from my hands, tossed it onto the manicured lawn, and hissed, "You're embarrassing us. Go away and never come back to this neighborhood again." That was it. The experiment was over. The results were in. And the pain was unbearable. But beneath the pain, a cold resolve began to harden. I turned away, not with tears in my eyes, but with a steely glint of determination. Pops was dead. Long live Mr. Callahan. I called my CEO, a loyal friend who had been with me since the beginning. "It's time," I said, my voice devoid of emotion. "Time for Pops to retire and Mr. Callahan to return." My plan was simple, elegant, and utterly devastating. I would expose the truth, publicly and without mercy. I would hold a mandatory residence meeting, right in Greg and Tiffany's precious apartment complex, with a special announcement that would shake their world to its very foundations. Formal notices were sent to every resident, including Greg and Tiffany, summoning them to a meeting with the hidden owner of the entire estate. The whispers started immediately. Who was this mysterious billionaire? What did they want? Greg and Tiffany, consumed by their own self-importance, speculated wildly, never once suspecting the truth. The day of the meeting arrived, thick with anticipation. As the residents gathered, buzzing with nervous energy, a helicopter descended from the sky, landing gracefully on a nearby golf course. The doors opened, and I stepped out, no longer the unassuming old man in work clothes, but a figure of power in a perfectly tailored suit, followed by a phalanx of assistants and lawyers. The silence was deafening. I walked to the podium, my gaze locking onto Greg and Tiffany, who stood frozen in shock, their faces pale with disbelief. Hello, everyone, I said, my voice calm and resonant. I'm Jack Callahan. Thank you for taking care of my property. A collective gasp swept through the crowd. Then, I delivered the final blow. I have an announcement. Due to some changes in the development plan, the lease on number 12, Greg and Tiffany's house, will not be renewed. You have 30 days to move out. I turned to Tiffany, my eyes devoid of warmth. And you owe me a wooden toy. The consequences were swift and brutal. Greg and Tiffany lost everything, their home, their friends, their status. They were exposed for the shallow, materialistic people they truly were, forced to confront the harsh reality of their dependence. As for me, I sold off most of my possessions, keeping only the land where my trailer stood. I transformed it into a nature reserve, a sanctuary of peace and tranquility. I traveled, did woodworking, and finally experienced true freedom, unburdened by toxic people and material possessions. So, the next time you see someone living in a trailer, don't be so quick to judge. You never know what secrets lie beneath the surface. And remember, true wealth isn't measured in dollars and cents, but in the richness of your character and the depth of your connections. Don't let greed and pride blind you to what truly matters in life. Because in the end, karma always has a way of evening the score. Now, go out there and build something real, something that lasts. Something that isn't built on the backs of others. And maybe, just maybe, you'll find true happiness along the way. So, there I was, back in my trailer, the Airstream that had seen more of life than Greg and Tiffany could ever imagine. The silence was almost deafening after the storm I'd unleashed. Part of me, the pop's part, ached. Ached for the grandson who wouldn't understand, for the son who'd chosen a gilded cage over genuine connection, for the daughter-in-law who traded her soul for social currency. But the Mr. Callahan part, the part forged in the fires of hard work and shrewd decisions, felt a grim satisfaction. Justice, however delayed, had been served. But what then? Kicking them out, exposing their shallow existence, it was a means to an end, not the end itself. It wasn't about reveling in their downfall, it was about clearing the way for something real, something lasting. That's the irony, isn't it? I spent my life building an empire, a monument to success, only to realize that the true treasures were the things I couldn't quantify, the things money couldn't buy. Greg and Tiffany, they were victims of their own making, trapped in a cycle of chasing validation from people who didn't truly care. They measured worth by square footage and brand names, oblivious to the emptiness that gnawed at their core. Their laughter, the laughter that once stung, now felt like a hollow echo, a testament to their own self-deception. I felt a pang of pity, yes, but also a firm resolve. They needed to hit rock bottom to even begin to understand the value of genuine connection, of honest work, of a life lived with purpose. My own purpose, it shifted. The nature reserve, that was just the beginning. I started funding scholarships for kids from underprivileged backgrounds, kids with the grit and determination I saw in myself all those years ago. I mentored young entrepreneurs, sharing the lessons I'd learned, the mistakes I'd made, the triumphs I'd celebrated. I wanted to build something that wasn't about accumulating wealth, but about empowering others to build their own lives, their own dreams. The land, that simple plot where my trailer sat, became a sanctuary. A place where I could reconnect with the earth, with the rhythm of nature, with the quiet wisdom that comes from solitude. Woodworking became my therapy, each piece a reflection of the lessons I'd learned, the scars I'd carried, the peace I'd finally found. Every cut, every polish, every finished product was a testament to the power of resilience, the beauty of imperfection, the joy of creation. I traveled, yes, but not to the exclusive resorts and fancy restaurants that Greg and Tiffany craved. I went to places where I could immerse myself in different cultures, where I could learn from different perspectives, where I could witness the resilience of the human spirit in the face of adversity. I volunteered in soup kitchens, built houses for the homeless, and listened to the stories of people who had nothing but their hope and their determination. Those experiences, they humbled me. They reminded me of the importance of gratitude, of compassion, of empathy. They taught me that true wealth lies not in what you possess, but in what you give. And in the end, that's the message I want to leave with you. Don't let the opinions of others define you. Don't chase after fleeting pleasures. Don't measure your worth by material possessions. Instead, focus on building something real, something lasting, something that makes a difference in the world. Something that isn't built on the backs of others. And maybe, just maybe, you'll find true happiness along the way. Find your own airstream, metaphorically speaking, and build something of lasting value. And maybe, just maybe, you'll find true happiness along the way. Find your own airstream, metaphorically speaking, and build something of lasting value. That's what I did, in the end. It wasn't about the money, though it certainly provided the means. It was about building something real, something lasting, something that wasn't predicated on fleeting approval or the shallow validation of others. It was about proving to myself that I could rise above the petty judgments and the stinging laughter. The laughter used to burn, you know. Like acid on my skin. I remember the sting of their words, the way they looked down on me, dismissing me as some kind of backwoods simpleton. They saw the trailer, the worn clothes, the calloused hands, and they assumed they knew everything. They assumed I was less than them. The irony, of course, was that I was the one holding all the cards. I was the architect of their gilded cage, the silent benefactor of their lavish lifestyle. And yet, they treated me with such disdain, such utter contempt. It was a calculated risk, living that way, exposing myself to their ridicule. I wanted to see if there was anything genuine left beneath the veneer of their manufactured perfection. I wanted to believe that blood still meant something, that family still held some kind of intrinsic value. But I was wrong. The disappointment was profound, a deep ache that settled in my bones. It wasn't just the betrayal, it was the realization that I had failed as a father. I had raised them to value the wrong things, to chase shadows instead of substance. Their obsession with status, their relentless pursuit of material possessions, it was a reflection of my own shortcomings. I had given them everything they ever wanted, and in doing so, I had robbed them of the opportunity to earn it, to appreciate it, to understand its true worth. That was my mistake. The garden party, that was the turning point. Tiffany's casual cruelty, the way she tossed that toy aside like it was garbage, the venom in her voice when she told me to disappear, that was the moment the last vestiges of hope died. It wasn't about the toy, it was about the message she was sending. It was about the complete and utter rejection of me, of everything I represented. And in that moment, I knew what I had to do. The plan wasn't about revenge, not really. It was about justice, about accountability. It was about forcing them to confront the consequences of their actions, to face the harsh reality of their dependence. They had built their lives on a foundation of lies and borrowed wealth, and it was time for that foundation to crumble. It was a cold calculation, I admit. But it was necessary. Watching their faces at that meeting, the shock and disbelief, the dawning realization that their carefully constructed world was about to fall apart, there was a certain satisfaction in that, I won't lie. But it was a bittersweet satisfaction, tinged with sadness and regret. I didn't want to hurt them, but I knew that sometimes, the only way to teach a lesson is to inflict a little pain. The aftermath was messy, of course. There were tears, recriminations, accusations. They blamed me for everything, for their misfortune, for their humiliation. They couldn't see that they were the architects of their own downfall. They couldn't understand that I was simply holding up a mirror, forcing them to confront the ugliness within themselves. But in the end, I believe they learned something. They learned that status is fleeting, that possessions are meaningless, and that true worth lies not in what you have, but in who you are. They learned that family is more than just a name, it's a bond that needs to be nurtured and cherished. And maybe, just maybe, they learned a little humility. I certainly did. I learned that you can't buy love, you can't force respect, and you can't shield your children from the consequences of their choices. All you can do is try to guide them, to teach them, and to hope that they eventually find their own way. And maybe, just maybe, forgive you for your own shortcomings along the way. It was a hard lesson for all of us. But one I think we all needed to learn. Now I spend my days woodworking, traveling, and enjoying the simple things in life. The land is now a nature preserve, a place where others can find peace and solitude. And that, in the end, is a legacy I can be proud of. The land is now a nature preserve, a place where others can find peace and solitude. And that, in the end, is a legacy I can be proud of. But getting there wasn't easy. It was a long road paved with frustration, disappointment, and a burning need to prove a point, not just to them, but to myself. You see, for years, I played the part. I was Pops, the simple old man living in a trailer. It was a disguise, a test, and in many ways, a self-imposed exile. The anger still simmers, even now. The memory of Tiffany, her face contorted with disdain as she tossed that wooden toy onto the dirt, it's a brand seared into my soul. That toy, I spent hours crafting it, sanding it smooth, envisioning my grandson's delight. It wasn't just a toy, it was a piece of my heart, offered with love. And she rejected it, rejected me, with such casual cruelty. That's when I knew, the game was over. Tolerance had run its course. The calculation that followed was cold, precise. It wasn't about revenge, not entirely. It was about justice, about forcing them to confront the reality of their choices. They built their lives on a foundation of false pretenses, on the illusion of wealth and status. They judged me, and others like me, based on superficial appearances, completely oblivious to the truth. The power I wielded, the control over their lives, it was both intoxicating and sickening. Intoxicating because it offered a way to right the wrong, to expose their hypocrisy. Sickening because it highlighted the corrupting influence of money and the shallowness of their values. I could have simply cut them off, left them to wallow in their self-made misery. But that wouldn't have taught them anything. They needed to understand the consequences of their actions, to experience the humiliation and the pain they so readily inflicted on others. The meeting, the reveal, the eviction notice, it was all carefully orchestrated, a dramatic performance designed to shatter their illusions. I watched their faces as I spoke, their initial confusion morphing into disbelief, then horror, then finally, a dawning understanding of the magnitude of their mistake. There was a part of me that felt a twinge of sympathy, a flicker of paternal affection. But it was quickly extinguished by the memory of Tiffany's cruelty and Greg's complicity. They had made their bed, and now they had to lie in it. It wasn't easy. Seeing them lose everything, their house, their friends, their carefully constructed social standing, it brought a hollow ache to my chest. But I knew it was necessary. They needed to learn humility, to understand the value of hard work, and to appreciate the things that truly matter in life, family, integrity, and compassion. The nature preserve, it's more than just a beautiful piece of land. It's a symbol of transformation, a testament to the power of resilience. It's a place where I can reconnect with nature, find solace in solitude, and remember the lessons I learned from that difficult chapter of my life. It's a reminder that true wealth lies not in material possessions, but in inner peace and genuine connection. I don't know if Greg and Tiffany ever truly understood the message. I hope they did. I hope they learned from their mistakes and emerged from the ashes of their former lives as better, more compassionate human beings. But ultimately, their journey is their own. My role was to provide the catalyst for change, to force them to confront the consequences of their actions. Perhaps, one day, they'll visit the nature preserve, walk the trails, and reflect on the events that led them there. Maybe they'll even find a measure of peace and reconciliation. But for now, I'm content knowing that I did what I believed was right, even though it was painful. So, what's the takeaway from this story? It's simple, don't judge a book by its cover. Be kind to everyone, regardless of their appearance or social status. And remember that true wealth lies not in what you own, but in who you are. Live with integrity, treat others with respect, and never let pride blind you to the value of human connection. That's a legacy worth more than all the money in the world. Now, go out there and make a difference. Be the change you want to see in the world. Don't wait for someone else to do it for you. Your actions, no matter how small, can have a ripple effect, creating a more just and compassionate world for all. And that's something to be truly proud of. Okay, let's delve deeper into this story, this raw nerve of a situation. You see, actions, no matter how seemingly insignificant, can indeed have a ripple effect, creating a more just and compassionate world for all. And that's something to be truly proud of. But what happens when those actions are fueled by malice, by a blatant disregard for human decency? What then? That's where the irony bites, where the anger simmers beneath the surface, threatening to boil over. Think about Greg and Tiffany. Living in that opulent mansion, completely oblivious to the source of their comfort, their privilege. They saw Jack, their father-in-law, as an embarrassment, a stain on their carefully curated image of success. They laughed at him, mocked his humble trailer, never suspecting that he held the keys to their entire gilded cage. The calculation behind their actions was cold, clinical. It was a strategic decision to distance themselves from someone they deemed beneath them, a risk assessment based on shallow social metrics. But Jack, Pops as they so dismissively called him, he wasn't just some harmless old man tinkering with wood in his trailer. He was Mr. Callahan, the architect of their very lifestyle. He possessed a quiet, undeniable power, a power born not of arrogance but of hard work and strategic vision. And that power, once unleashed, was a force to be reckoned with. The frustration he must have felt, watching his own children treat him with such disdain, must have been immense. It was a trial, a test of his own patience and resolve. He could have exposed them at any moment, pulled the rug out from under them with a single phone call. But he waited, he observed, he allowed their arrogance to fester, knowing that the eventual reckoning would be all the more devastating. The garden party incident, the ultimate act of disrespect, was the breaking point. Tiffany's casual dismissal, her callous disregard for the handmade toy, it was a slap in the face, a rejection of his very being. It was then that the calm, measured power of Mr. Callahan truly emerged. The plan, the blueprint of justice, was meticulously crafted. There was no room for error, no space for sentimentality. It was a calculated move, designed to expose their hypocrisy and force them to confront the consequences of their actions. The mandatory residence meeting, the helicopter landing, the perfectly tailored suit, it was all a carefully orchestrated spectacle, designed to maximize the impact. The look on Greg and Tiffany's faces, the frozen shock, the dawning realization that their entire world was about to crumble, it must have been a sight to behold. And Jack, standing at the podium, delivering the news with a calm, unwavering voice, he was the embodiment of righteous justice. You have 30 days to move out. A simple sentence, but one that carried the weight of years of resentment and disappointment. The consequences were swift and severe. They lost everything. Their home, their friends, their status. They were forced to confront the harsh reality of their own dependence, their own lack of self-worth. And Jack, having delivered his verdict, walked away. He sold most of his possessions, freed himself from the trappings of wealth and the toxicity of his children. He kept the land where his trailer stood, transforming it into a nature reserve, a sanctuary of peace and tranquility. He finally found true freedom, untethered from the expectations and demands of a society obsessed with material possessions. This story, at its core, is a cautionary tale about the dangers of pride and the importance of humility. It's a reminder that true wealth lies not in what we own, but in who we are. It's about tolerance and reconciliation, about finding peace within ourselves and extending that peace to others. It's about understanding that judging others based on superficial appearances is a dangerous and ultimately self-destructive game. Perhaps, Greg and Tiffany will learn from this experience. Perhaps, they will emerge from the ashes of their former lives with a newfound appreciation for the things that truly matter. And perhaps, one day, they will be able to look their father in the eye and say, "Thank you." That, perhaps, is the ultimate act of reconciliation. But until then, let this story serve as a reminder that our actions have consequences, and that true justice, while sometimes delayed, will always find its way. That, perhaps, is the ultimate act of reconciliation. But until then, let this story serve as a reminder that our actions have consequences, and that true justice, while sometimes delayed, will always find its way. Now, you might be thinking, okay, Pop's got his revenge. Greg and Tiffany got what they deserved. End of story, right? But it's never that simple, is it? Life rarely offers such neat, tidy conclusions. The truth is, even in victory, there's often a lingering ache, a sense of what could have been. Think about it from Jack's perspective. He spent years building an empire, not just for himself, but for his children. He wanted them to have a better life, a life free from the struggles he faced. But somewhere along the line, that desire got twisted. His children became consumed by materialism, by the shallow pursuit of status and acceptance. He had inadvertently created the monsters that now scorned him. That realization must have been a bitter pill to swallow. The anger, the frustration, it all boils down to a profound disappointment in the people he loved most. And what about Greg and Tiffany? Sure, they were awful. They were arrogant and cruel, blinded by their own privilege. But were they inherently evil? Or were they simply products of a society that glorifies wealth and status above all else? It's easy to demonize them, to paint them as villains, but the truth is, they're just flawed human beings, caught in a trap of their own making. They traded genuine connection for superficial validation, and in the end, they lost everything. Their humiliation was public, their fall from grace swift and complete. They were left to face the consequences of their choices, stripped bare of the material possessions they so desperately clung to. The irony of the situation is almost Shakespearean. Jack, the man they dismissed as a simple country bumpkin, was the architect of their opulent lifestyle. He held the keys to their gilded cage, and when they betrayed him, he didn't hesitate to lock them out. It was a calculated move, a demonstration of power, but it was also an act of profound sadness. He was forced to destroy the very thing he had created, to dismantle the illusion of happiness that his children had so carefully constructed. And what about the other residents of the estate? They were witnesses to this dramatic unraveling, forced to confront the reality that their seemingly stable world was built on a foundation of secrets and lies. They saw firsthand the fragility of wealth and status, the ease with which it can be taken away. It's likely that many of them re-evaluated their own values, questioning the importance they placed on material possessions and social standing. The story of Jack Callahan is a cautionary tale, a reminder that true wealth lies not in what we own, but in who we are. It's a story about the corrosive power of greed and the importance of humility and compassion. It's a story about the complexities of family relationships and the pain of betrayal. And ultimately, it's a story about the search for meaning and purpose in a world that often prioritizes the superficial over the substantial. Jack's journey to reclaim his life, to shed the weight of his possessions and reconnect with his passions, is an inspiration. He found freedom in simplicity, in the quiet act of creating something beautiful with his own hands. He chose to live authentically, on his own terms, regardless of what others thought. So, what can we learn from this story? Perhaps it's to question our own values, to examine the things we prioritize in our lives. Are we chasing after fleeting pleasures and superficial validation, or are we investing in meaningful relationships and pursuing our passions? Are we judging others based on their appearance or their possessions, or are we looking deeper, seeking to understand their true character? Let's strive to be more like Jack in his final act, embracing simplicity, pursuing authenticity, and valuing the things that truly matter: love, connection, and purpose. 1,000 words. Okay, let's dive deeper into this story of Jack, the unassuming millionaire in a trailer, and the harsh lesson he taught his children. We left off with the idea of judging others based on appearances, and how Jack's final act was a testament to embracing simplicity and valuing what truly matters. It's easy to get caught up in the superficial. We see the shiny cars, the big houses, the designer clothes, and we automatically assume success, happiness, maybe even superiority. But Jack's story is a stark reminder that those things are just things. They don't define a person's worth, their intelligence, or their capacity for love. Greg and Tiffany, blinded by their own pursuit of status, completely missed the mark. They saw their father as an embarrassment, a stain on their carefully curated image. The irony, of course, is that their entire lifestyle was built on his wealth they hadn't earned and didn't appreciate. Their pride was a fragile facade, built on rented land, both literally and figuratively. The pain Jack must have felt, being rejected by his own children for something as shallow as his living situation, is almost unbearable to imagine. It's a deep, primal wound, the kind that cuts to the core of your being. He had poured his life into building an empire, presumably with the intention of providing for his family, only to be scorned for not fitting their idea of what success should look like. The anger is palpable, a slow burn that fuels his calculated revenge. It wasn't about the money, not really. It was about the disrespect, the lies, the blatant disregard for him as a human being. Think about that garden party scene. Tiffany, tossing the handmade toy on the ground, telling him to disappear. That wasn't just a moment of rudeness, it was a complete rejection of Jack's love, his effort, his very existence in their world. The toy, a symbol of his affection for his grandson, was treated like garbage. That's the moment the experiment ended, the moment Jack realized the depth of their shallowness. His response wasn't impulsive or emotional. It was cold, calculated, and delivered with the calm power of someone who knows they hold all the cards. The mandatory residence meeting, a stroke of genius. Imagine the anticipation, the speculation, the smugness of people like Greg and Tiffany, wondering who this mysterious owner could be. Then, the helicopter, the tailored suit, the lawyers, the utter shock on their faces. It's a scene dripping with irony. The announcement, delivered with such casual authority, the lease on number 12 will not be renewed, is a masterclass in understated devastation. He didn't yell, he didn't scream, he simply stated a fact that shattered their entire world. And the final dig, "You owe me a wooden toy," a perfect blend of severity and a subtle reminder of their cruelty. But this story isn't just about revenge. It's about freedom. Jack, having shed the weight of his toxic family and his material possessions, finally finds true peace. He transforms his land into a nature reserve, a sanctuary of simplicity and authenticity. He dedicates himself to woodworking, to travel, to pursuing passions that truly fulfill him. He's no longer defined by his wealth or his children's expectations. He's free. So, what can we learn from Jack's journey? First, be wary of judging others based on appearances. You never know what someone is truly capable of, what they've overcome, or what they're hiding beneath the surface. Second, value genuine connection over superficial status. Friends and family who love you for who you are, not what you have, are the true treasures in life. And finally, don't let others define your worth. Find your own passions, pursue your own dreams, and live a life that is authentic to you, regardless of what anyone else thinks. Because in the end, all that truly matters is who you are as a person, and the impact you have on the world. Let's remember Jack's tale and strive to build a world where humility and genuine connection triumph over superficiality and greed. What are your thoughts on this? Share your stories in the comments below and let's start a conversation about valuing what truly matters. Okay, here's the script, aiming for the requested tone, length, and style. What are your thoughts on this? Share your stories in the comments below and let's start a conversation about valuing what truly matters. Because, honestly, how many of us have been judged? How many of us have felt the sting of condescension, the subtle or not so subtle jabs at our choices, our homes, our lives? I know I have. And that feeling, that burning ember of frustration and anger, it can either consume you or fuel you. For me, it fueled a quiet determination, a silent vow to prove them wrong, not for them, but for myself. And that's what this story, the story of Jack "Pops" Callahan, really resonated with me. It's not just about a rich guy getting revenge. It's about the pain of being dismissed, of being seen as less than. Imagine pouring your heart into something, building an empire from the ground up, only to have your own children treat you like a shameful secret. The irony is almost unbearable. He created the very world they inhabit, the world they use to elevate themselves, and yet, he's deemed unworthy of their company. That's a special kind of hurt, a betrayal that cuts deeper than any financial loss. Think about Tiffany, throwing that handmade toy on the ground. That wasn't just dismissing a gift, that was dismissing him, his love, his entire existence. It was a public declaration of her shame, a slap in the face delivered with calculated cruelty. You can almost feel the weight of that moment, the air thickening with unspoken words, the crushing disappointment etched on Jack's face. It's a scene that speaks volumes about the corrosive nature of social climbing and the lengths people will go to protect their fragile egos. But here's where the story shifts. That moment of profound humiliation, that's the catalyst. It's the point where Pops disappears and Mr. Callahan emerges. It's the calm before the storm, the quiet calculation as he formulates his plan. And what a plan it is. Simple, elegant, and devastatingly effective. He doesn't lash out in anger, he uses his power, his absolute financial control, to deliver a cold, hard dose of reality. It's a masterclass in ironic justice. The mandatory residence meeting, genius. The anticipation, the hushed whispers, the speculation about the mysterious owner. Greg and Tiffany, undoubtedly preening and posturing, completely oblivious to the impending doom. They're so caught up in their own self-importance, they can't even fathom that the man they've been so desperately trying to distance themselves from holds the key to their entire existence. And then, the helicopter. The perfectly tailored suit. The team of assistants and lawyers. It's a scene straight out of a movie, a visual representation of power and authority. But it's not just about the spectacle, it's about the message. He's not just reclaiming his property, he's reclaiming his dignity. He's showing them, and everyone else present, that appearances can be deceiving, that true worth isn't measured in dollars and cents. The final confrontation, the eviction notice delivered with icy precision, is the culmination of years of suppressed resentment and unspoken pain. "You owe me a wooden toy." That single sentence is loaded with meaning, a poignant reminder of their callous disregard for his feelings and their shallow pursuit of status. It's a moment of triumph, yes, but it's also a moment of profound sadness. He didn't want to do this. He wanted their love, their acceptance. But they pushed him too far. And what happens next? Greg and Tiffany lose everything. Their home, their friends, their status. They're stripped bare, forced to confront the emptiness of their materialistic existence. It's a harsh lesson, but perhaps a necessary one. Maybe, just maybe, they'll learn to value what truly matters, family, connection, and genuine human kindness. As for Jack, he finds peace. He sheds the trappings of wealth and embraces a simpler life, surrounded by nature and the satisfaction of creating something with his own hands. He finds freedom in letting go, in no longer being defined by his possessions or the opinions of others. He transforms his land into a nature reserve, a testament to his newfound appreciation for the simple things in life. It's a powerful reminder that true wealth isn't about what you have, but about who you are. It's about living authentically, embracing your values, and finding joy in the present moment. So, what do you take away from this story? Is it about revenge? Or is it about something deeper, the importance of humility, the dangers of superficiality, and the enduring power of love and forgiveness? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And remember, don't judge a book by its cover, or a millionaire by his trailer. You never know what lies beneath the surface. And remember, Don't judge a book by its cover, or a millionaire by his trailer. You never know what lies beneath the surface. The irony of it all, isn't it? They laughed at the old man in the Airstream, the country bumpkin, as they so elegantly put it. They saw only the weathered exterior, the simplicity of a life they couldn't fathom. They were blinded by their own gilded cages, their obsession with appearances, with keeping up with the Joneses, or in their case, surpassing them. Little did they know, that Airstream was parked on a goldmine, both literally and figuratively. That bumpkin owned the whole damn mine. The anger still simmers, you know. It's a slow burn, a resentment that claws its way up from the depths. It wasn't just about the trailer, it was about the disrespect, the blatant disregard for a human being, their own flesh and blood. To be treated like some embarrassing secret, something to be hidden away from their oh-so-important friends and business partners, that stings. The frustration was immense. Years spent building an empire, providing for his family, only to be met with such blatant disdain. He'd hoped, foolishly perhaps, that his children would see beyond the material wealth, that they would value him for who he was, not what he possessed. But no, they were consumed by the trappings of wealth, obsessed with status, and utterly oblivious to the true source of their privilege. The trial he put them through, living the simple life, it was a desperate attempt to see if any shred of humanity remained, if there was any genuine love beneath the veneer of entitlement. The wooden toy, that was the last straw. A simple gesture of love, rejected so cruelly, tossed aside like trash. It was a symbol of everything that had gone wrong, the chasm that had grown between him and his children. But amidst the pain and anger, a plan began to form. A cold, calculated plan, born of years of business acumen and a burning desire for justice. It wasn't about revenge, not really. It was about teaching them a lesson, a harsh but necessary lesson about humility, about the true meaning of wealth, and about the importance of family. He'd spent a lifetime building something for them, and they were squandering it, not just the money, but the values he tried to instill. The Pops persona had served its purpose. It was time for Mr. Callahan to step back into the spotlight. The tolerance he'd shown, the countless slights he'd endured, it all reached a breaking point. The power he wielded, the absolute financial control, it was a double-edged sword. He could give them everything, but he could also take it all away. And that's precisely what he intended to do. The mandatory residence meeting, it was a masterstroke of irony. To reveal himself, not as the doddering old man in the trailer, but as the owner, the puppet master pulling the strings, the man who held their entire existence in his hands. The look on their faces, the shock, the disbelief, the dawning realization that their carefully constructed world was about to crumble, that was priceless. The calm that washed over him as he delivered the eviction notice, it was a sense of liberation. He was no longer bound by their expectations, their judgment, their petty dramas. He had given them a chance, and they had failed miserably. Now, they would face the consequences of their actions. He owed them nothing, except perhaps a wooden toy, a reminder of their cruelty and his own quiet power. The reconciliation, if it ever came, would have to be on their terms, not his. They would have to earn it. He sold off most of his possessions, the mansions, the yachts, the symbols of a life he no longer desired. He kept the land where his trailer stood, a sanctuary of simplicity and peace. He traveled, did woodworking, and found a sense of purpose in giving back to the community. He was free, truly free, from the toxic relationships and the suffocating expectations. The trailer, it wasn't just a place to live, it was a symbol of his independence, his resilience, and his unwavering commitment to living life on his own terms. Don't underestimate the quiet power of a man who owns his own land, and his own soul. The trailer, it wasn't just a place to live, it was a symbol of his independence, his resilience, and his unwavering commitment to living life on his own terms. Don't underestimate the quiet power of a man who owns his own land, and his own soul. But that quiet power can simmer, can fester, when faced with the constant, condescending laughter of those who should know better, those who share your blood. It's a particular kind of pain, the sting of being dismissed by your own children, the ones you nurtured, provided for, and ultimately, perhaps, spoiled. The irony isn't lost on me, not for a second. They see the rusty exterior, the faded paint, the simplicity of my chosen lifestyle, and they equate it with poverty, with failure. They parade their manufactured wealth, their leased luxury, their borrowed status, like trophies, oblivious to the fact that the very ground beneath their feet, the roof over their heads, is mine. The anger, oh, it burns. It's a slow, controlled burn, fueled by years of biting my tongue, of swallowing the insults, of watching them turn their noses up at the man who built the empire they so readily consume. They mistake my humility for weakness, my patience for ignorance. They think I'm some doddering old fool, easily manipulated, easily dismissed. They couldn't be more wrong. This isn't just about money, it's about respect, about family, about the values I tried, and clearly failed, to instill in them. It's about the hollowness of their lives, the emptiness that lies beneath the designer clothes and the gated communities. They chase after fleeting pleasures, empty validation, and forget the true meaning of connection, of loyalty, of love. The calculation began long ago, almost as soon as I saw the direction their lives were taking. The subtle hints, the gentle nudges towards a more grounded existence, were met with resistance, with disdain. So, I retreated, I observed, I planned. I watched them build their castles on sand, oblivious to the tide that was inevitably coming. The frustration mounted with each passing year, with each snide remark, with each deliberate exclusion. It felt like a betrayal, a rejection of everything I stood for. But I refused to let it break me. Instead, I channeled that frustration into a steely determination, a resolve to teach them a lesson they would never forget. A lesson about humility, about gratitude, about the true value of hard work and honest living. The trial was severe, a self-imposed exile from the lives of my own children. It was a test of my own strength, my own resolve. Could I stand by and watch them squander their lives, their potential, on meaningless pursuits? Could I endure the constant disrespect, the blatant disregard for my feelings? It was agonizing, a constant battle between the love I felt for them and the disappointment I couldn't deny. But I knew, deep down, that this was the only way. They needed to hit rock bottom, to lose everything, before they could truly understand the value of what they had. Tolerance, reconciliation, those were the hopes I clung to, the faint glimmer of light in the darkness. Perhaps, after the dust settled, after the illusions shattered, they would finally see me, not as the embarrassing old man in a trailer, but as their father, the man who loved them enough to let them fall, so they could learn to fly on their own. The calm that comes with knowing you're doing what's necessary, even when it's painful, is a power all its own. It's the power of conviction, the power of knowing you're acting in accordance with your own values, regardless of the consequences. And the consequences, they will be significant. But sometimes, the only way to rebuild is to tear down, to expose the rot, to start anew. It's not about revenge, it's about redemption. It's about giving them a chance, a painful, brutal chance, to become the people they were always meant to be. The land, the empire, it's all just a tool, a means to an end. The real treasure is the hope that one day, my children will understand. The land, the empire, it's all just a tool, a means to an end. The real treasure is the hope that one day, my children will understand. It's a foolish hope, maybe, clinging to the idea that blood is thicker than water, that family ties can withstand the corrosive acid of greed and superficiality. But what else does a man have, after all the deals are done, the buildings are built, and the money is stacked high? What good is a kingdom if you have no one to share it with, no one who sees beyond the gilded cage to the person inside? They laughed, didn't they? Laughed at the old man in the trailer, the supposed simpleton who didn't know which fork to use at a fancy dinner. They saw the wrinkles, the worn clothes, the calloused hands, and they saw weakness. They saw someone to be ashamed of, someone to hide away from their equally shallow friends. The irony, of course, was delicious. They were living in a world I created, breathing air I paid for, but they were too blinded by their own self-importance to see it. The anger, it simmers. It's a slow burn that eats away at you, leaving behind a bitter residue of disappointment. You raise children, you sacrifice for them, you try to instill values, and then you watch them become exactly what you hoped they wouldn't. It's a betrayal, not of me, but of themselves. They traded authenticity for acceptance, integrity for Instagram likes. And for what? A fleeting moment of validation from people who wouldn't give them the time of day if the money dried up. The calculation, that's the part that keeps me sane. It's the chess game, the strategic maneuvering, the cold, hard logic that balances the emotional turmoil. Every move was planned, every consequence considered. It wasn't about revenge, not really. It was about teaching a lesson, a harsh one, perhaps, but necessary. Sometimes, you have to tear down the facade to reveal the rot underneath. Sometimes, you have to break something to rebuild it stronger. The calm that comes after the storm is deceptive. It's not peace, not exactly. It's more like a weary resignation. The adrenaline fades, the anger subsides, and you're left with the quiet realization that you've irrevocably altered the course of their lives. Did I do the right thing? The question echoes in the silence, unanswered, perhaps unanswerable. But I can't regret it. I had to try. I had to give them a chance to see themselves, to understand the emptiness of their pursuit. The frustration, that's the constant companion. The endless cycle of trying to connect, trying to reach them, only to be met with indifference or outright hostility. It's like shouting into a void, your voice swallowed by the darkness, leaving you with nothing but the echo of your own futility. You want to shake them, to force them to see, but you can't. They have to choose to open their eyes. The determination, that's what keeps me going. The stubborn refusal to give up completely. Even after the garden party, after the toy was thrown on the ground, after the final, crushing blow, there's still a flicker of hope. Maybe, just maybe, they'll learn. Maybe they'll understand that true wealth isn't measured in dollars and cents, but in the strength of your character, the depth of your relationships, and the kindness you show to others. The trial was severe, yes. Stripping them of everything they thought they valued, exposing them to the harsh realities of life. But it was a necessary surgery, a painful but potentially life-saving procedure. They were living in a fantasy, a bubble of privilege and entitlement, and it was slowly suffocating them. I had to pop the bubble, even if it meant causing them pain. Tolerance, that's the long game. The ability to forgive, to understand, to accept their flaws and imperfections. It's not about condoning their behavior, but about recognizing that they are products of their environment, victims of their own insecurities. It's about giving them the space to grow, to learn, to evolve. Reconciliation, that's the ultimate goal. The hope that one day, we can bridge the divide, that we can find common ground, that we can rebuild our relationship on a foundation of honesty and respect. It won't be easy. It will take time, patience, and a willingness to forgive and forget. But it's worth fighting for. Because in the end, family is all that matters. And maybe, just maybe, they'll finally understand that. Maybe they'll see that the trailer wasn't a symbol of poverty, but a symbol of freedom, a testament to the fact that true wealth lies not in what you own, but in who you are. And if they can grasp that, then all of this, the pain, the anger, the calculation, it will all have been worth it. So, subscribe, share this story, and let's hope that someone out there learns a valuable lesson about humility and what truly matters in life. And if they can grasp that, then all of this, the pain, the anger, the calculation, it will all have been worth it. So, subscribe, share this story, and let's hope that someone out there learns a valuable lesson about humility and what truly matters in life. The irony, you see, it's thick enough to cut with a knife. They sneered at the trailer, the symbol of what they perceived as my backwardness, my lack of sophistication. They didn't see it as a home, a place of refuge, but as a marker of shame they desperately wanted to erase. The anger still simmers, a low burn beneath the surface. To be judged, dismissed, by the very people you brought into this world, it's a unique kind of betrayal. But anger, unchecked, is a destructive force. It can blind you, lead you down paths you'll later regret. That's why the calculation, the cold, detached planning, was so crucial. It wasn't about revenge, not really. It was about justice, about forcing them to confront the consequences of their actions. The calm I felt as the helicopter touched down, that was power. Not the power of money, although that was a tool, but the power of knowing I was in control, that I held all the cards. They had built their lives on a foundation of sand, a facade of wealth and status that crumbled with a single word. The frustration had been building for years, watching them chase after fleeting pleasures, neglecting the values I tried to instill in them. The determination to make them understand, to break through their self-absorption, that was the driving force behind everything. The trial was severe, I admit. Stripping them of their home, their social standing, it was a harsh lesson. But sometimes, the only way to truly learn is to lose everything. To be forced to confront your own flaws, your own dependence on superficial things. Tolerance, that's what I hoped for, eventually. Not necessarily for me, but for themselves. To learn to tolerate others, regardless of their background or possessions. To see the value in hard work, in genuine connection, in simple acts of kindness. Reconciliation, that's the long shot. It may never happen. The wounds are deep, the resentment runs strong. But even if they never forgive me, even if they continue to see me as the villain in their story, I can live with that. Because I know, deep down, that I did what I had to do. I gave them a chance to learn, a chance to grow. Whether they take it or not, that's up to them. My own journey, it's been one of simplification. Shedding the trappings of wealth, the burdens of responsibility. That land, where the trailer sits, that's my sanctuary. It's a reminder that true wealth isn't measured in dollars and cents, but in the beauty of nature, the peace of solitude, the freedom to live on your own terms. The woodworking, the travel, these are the things that bring me joy now. Not the accumulation of possessions, not the approval of others. And that wooden toy, the one Tiffany threw on the ground. I still have it. It's a symbol, not just of their rejection, but of my own commitment to craftsmanship, to creating something with my own hands. It's a reminder that even in the face of cruelty, beauty can still be found. It represents the love I have for my grandson, a love that transcends their shallow values. I hope, one day, he'll understand. I hope, one day, he'll see that his grandfather wasn't just an old man living in a trailer, but a man who tried, in his own flawed way, to teach his children a valuable lesson about life. And if this story resonates with you, if it makes you question your own values, your own priorities, then perhaps it will inspire you to make a change. To be more compassionate, more understanding, more focused on what truly matters. To find your own version of that quiet peace in the country, far from the noise and the judgment. Remember, it's not about the trailer, it's about what's inside. It's about the values you hold, the love you share, and the legacy you leave behind. Remember, it's not about the trailer, it's about what's inside. It's about the values you hold, the love you share, and the legacy you leave behind. And honestly, that's a lesson I had to hammer into my own kids, Greg and, well, Tiffany. They saw the airstream, the simple life I was living, and they saw shame. They saw something to be hidden, a dirty little secret that threatened their carefully constructed world of country clubs and cocktail parties. The irony, of course, was that their world, their lavish lifestyle, was built on my foundation, on the land I owned, the empire I had quietly built. The anger still simmers, you know. The sting of being treated like an embarrassment, like a stain on their perfect image. It wasn't just the trailer, it was the dismissal, the contempt. They saw a simple old man, they didn't see the architect, the owner, the father. I played the part, though. I let them believe I was just a doddering old fool, content with my quiet life. Part of me wanted to see if they would ever look past the surface, if they would ever appreciate me for who I was, not for what I could provide. But the truth? It was a test they miserably failed. The garden party, that was the breaking point. Seeing my grandson, wanting to give him a simple, handmade toy, and being turned away like a beggar. That's when the calm calculation began. Revenge? Maybe. Justice? Definitely. It wasn't about the money, not really. It was about respect, about teaching them a lesson in humility that they desperately needed. The plan was simple: reveal the truth, expose their dependence, and let them face the consequences of their actions. I knew it would be painful, for them and for me. But sometimes, the most painful lessons are the most necessary. The meeting, that was a carefully orchestrated performance. The shock on their faces when I stepped out of that helicopter, the tailored suit a stark contrast to the overalls they were used to seeing me in, it was almost satisfying. Almost. Seeing the realization dawn on them that their entire world was a house of cards, built on my land, fueled by my money, and that I could take it all away with a single word, that was the power they had so carelessly dismissed. The eviction notice? It was harsh, I know. But it was a necessary wake-up call. They needed to understand the true value of things, the importance of character over status, the meaning of family over superficiality. The consequences were swift and brutal. They lost their home, their friends, their social standing. They were forced to confront the reality of their own shallowness, their own dependence. Now, I'm not going to pretend that it was easy. Seeing them struggle, seeing the pain in their eyes, it hurt. But sometimes, tough love is the only love that works. I sold most of the trappings of wealth, the mansions, the cars, the investments. I kept the land where my trailer sits, and I turned it into a nature preserve. A place of peace, a place of reflection, a place where I can reconnect with what truly matters. I travel now, I do woodworking, I spend time with my grandson, teaching him the values that his parents seem to have forgotten. I'm not sure if Greg and Tiffany have learned their lesson. Maybe they have. Maybe they haven't. But I know that I've found a sense of peace, a sense of freedom, that I haven't felt in years. The trailer? It's not just a home, it's a reminder. A reminder of what's important, a reminder of the power of humility, a reminder that true wealth lies not in possessions, but in character. So, the next time you see someone living a simple life, don't judge. Don't assume. You never know what lies beneath the surface. You never know the story they have to tell. And maybe, just maybe, you might learn something from them. Maybe you'll even learn something about yourself. What do you value? What are you living for? Are you chasing status or chasing something real? Think about it. The answer might surprise you. Think about it. The answer might surprise you. Maybe you're picturing some dramatic showdown, a screaming match, maybe even a physical altercation. But real power, the kind that truly stings, rarely comes with raised voices. It's the quiet, calculated dismantling of someone's carefully constructed facade that truly leaves a mark. And believe me, the plan brewing in my mind was meticulously calculated. The pain of their rejection, the anger at their blatant disregard for my feelings, fueled a cold, simmering rage. I wasn't going to yell, I wasn't going to plead. I was going to expose them. They thought they knew me. They saw Pops, the simple old man living in a trailer. They saw someone to be ashamed of, someone to hide from their fancy friends. They didn't see Jack Callahan, the man who built an empire from the ground up, the man who held the keys to their gilded cage. That naivete, that arrogance, was their fatal flaw. They were so busy trying to appear successful, they forgot to actually be successful. They were renters, living a lifestyle they couldn't afford, entirely dependent on my goodwill, and they treated me like dirt. The irony was almost unbearable. The frustration was immense. Years of hard work, building a legacy, and this is how my own flesh and blood treated me. It wasn't about the money, not really. It was about respect, about family. And they had thrown it all away for the fleeting validation of their shallow social circle. The toy, that simple wooden toy I made for my grandson, became a symbol of their rejection, a physical manifestation of their disdain. When Tiffany tossed it on the ground, it wasn't just wood hitting concrete, it was my heart breaking. But that heartbreak quickly turned to a steely resolve. The trial had ended. The experiment was over. They had failed. Miserably. It was time for the consequences. I could have simply cut them off financially, but that wouldn't have been enough. They needed to understand the true value of humility, the importance of genuine connection, the emptiness of chasing status. And the only way to teach them that lesson was to take away everything they thought mattered. The calmness that washed over me was almost unsettling. It was the quiet before the storm, the eye of the hurricane. I knew exactly what I had to do. The gears started turning. The plan, the blueprint of justice, began to take shape. I contacted my CEO, a loyal and trusted confidant who had been with me since the beginning. It was time to dust off the Mr. Callahan persona, the ruthless businessman they had never met. Pops was going into retirement, and Mr. Callahan was about to make a grand entrance. The announcement was simple, a mandatory residence meeting. Every tenant in the complex, including Greg and Tiffany, received a formal notice. The purpose? To meet the hidden owner of the entire estate. The invitation was shrouded in mystery, fueling speculation and gossip among the residents. Greg and Tiffany, naturally, were buzzing with excitement, trying to guess the identity of the elusive billionaire. They envisioned some stuffy old tycoon, someone they could schmooze and impress. They had no idea the shock that awaited them. The day of the meeting arrived. I watched from afar as Greg and Tiffany arrived, dressed to the nines, radiating an air of smug superiority. They were practically giddy with anticipation, completely oblivious to the impending doom. The anticipation was palpable. The air crackled with unspoken questions. Then, the sound of a helicopter shattered the silence. It landed on the nearby golf course, the Callahan Holdings logo emblazoned on its side. The doors opened, and I stepped out. Not in my worn overalls and flannel shirt, but in a perfectly tailored suit, radiating power and authority. My team of lawyers and assistants followed close behind, their faces grim and determined. The crowd gasped. Greg and Tiffany stood frozen, their faces a mixture of disbelief, horror, and dawning realization. The silence was deafening. I walked to the podium, my gaze unwavering, and looked directly at Greg and Tiffany. "Hello, everyone," I said, my voice calm and steady. "I'm Jack Callahan. Thank you for taking such good care of my property." A collective murmur rippled through the crowd. Then, I delivered the blow. "I have an announcement. Due to some changes in the development plan, the lease on number 12 will not be renewed. You have 30 days to vacate the premises." I turned to Tiffany, a faint smile playing on my lips. "And you owe me a wooden toy." The color drained from her face. The facade crumbled. The laughter and whispers began. It was over. They had lost. And in that moment, I felt a sense of profound satisfaction, a bittersweet victory tinged with both anger and a strange sense of peace. The calm after the storm had begun. They would face the consequences of their actions, and perhaps, just perhaps, learn a valuable lesson about the true meaning of wealth and family. The calm after the storm had begun. They would face the consequences of their actions, and perhaps, just perhaps, learn a valuable lesson about the true meaning of wealth and family. But the story doesn't end there, does it? It rarely does. Life has a funny way of twisting and turning, offering unexpected outcomes and forcing us to confront the realities we've so carefully constructed. Greg and Tiffany, stripped of their lavish lifestyle, their social standing crumbling around them, were left to grapple with the hollowness of their existence. The designer clothes, the fancy cars, the meticulously curated image, all of it vanished, revealing the stark emptiness beneath. The anger I felt watching them flaunt their privilege, their disdain for me, their own father and father-in-law, was immense. But even in that anger, there was a sliver of hope, a desperate wish that they might finally understand the value of hard work, humility, and genuine connection. The irony wasn't lost on me. They had laughed at my simple life, my trailer, my perceived lack of sophistication. They judged me based on appearances, completely oblivious to the fact that I controlled their entire world. They were puppets dancing on strings I held, and the performance was over. The calculation behind my actions wasn't born of malice, but of a deep-seated desire to awaken them from their gilded slumber. I wanted them to see beyond the surface, to understand that true wealth lies not in possessions, but in character. Selling off the properties, dismantling the empire I had built, felt liberating. It was a severing of ties, a shedding of skin. The weight of responsibility, the constant pressure to maintain appearances, lifted from my shoulders. The money, the power, it all became meaningless in the face of genuine human connection. The frustration I had carried for years, watching my children chase fleeting pleasures, finally began to dissipate. I had given them everything, but in doing so, I had inadvertently deprived them of the opportunity to earn their own way, to discover their own strength. The trial I put them through was harsh, I know that. Some might even call it cruel. But sometimes, the most profound lessons are learned through the crucible of adversity. The severity of the punishment was a direct reflection of the severity of their actions. They had not only disrespected me, but they had also disrespected the values I held dear: honesty, integrity, and compassion. Tolerance has its limits, and they had crossed them. The land where my trailer stood, now a sprawling nature reserve, became my sanctuary. It was a place of peace, a refuge from the chaos and superficiality of the world. I spent my days woodworking, creating simple, functional objects with my own hands. It was a grounding experience, a reminder of the simple joys in life. The reconciliation I sought wasn't necessarily with Greg and Tiffany, but with myself. I needed to forgive myself for enabling their behavior, for prioritizing financial success over their emotional well-being. What happened to them? Well, they struggled. They faced the harsh realities of the working world, the indignity of starting over from scratch. They learned what it felt like to be judged, to be dismissed, to be invisible. I didn't interfere. I let them navigate their own path, hoping that they would emerge stronger and wiser. This isn't just a story about a rich man teaching his spoiled children a lesson. It's a story about the corrosive nature of materialism, the importance of humility, and the enduring power of family. It's a reminder that true wealth lies not in what you own, but in who you are. It's a call to action, a challenge to examine our own values and to prioritize genuine connection over superficial appearances. So, what can you take away from this story? First, don't judge a book by its cover. Appearances can be deceiving, and true value often lies hidden beneath the surface. Second, cultivate humility. Pride goes before a fall, and arrogance can blind you to the realities of the world. Third, prioritize relationships. Family and friends are more valuable than any material possession. Fourth, live a life of purpose. Find something that you are passionate about and pursue it with all your heart. And finally, be kind. Compassion and empathy can make a world of difference in the lives of others. Think about your own life. Are you chasing fleeting pleasures or pursuing lasting fulfillment? Are you prioritizing appearances over authenticity? Are you valuing possessions over people? Take a moment to reflect on your own values and make sure they align with the kind of person you want to be. Share this story with your friends and family. Start a conversation about the true meaning of wealth and happiness. Let's work together to create a world where kindness, compassion, and genuine connection are valued above all else. And remember, the greatest wealth of all is a life well lived.